Colombia, Colombia is going to revert back to the time when the FARC were at the height of their power, and the state would have collapsed if not for the U.S. Piazza from UNC finds that state collapse increases the chance of transnational terrorism by 15 times. Second off, according to The Guardian, without the concessions in the peace deal, the FARC backs out. These concessions are expensive, funding the reintegration of FARC members into society, funding a new restorative justice system, and funding the protection of 23 safety zones for demobilized rebels. The U.S. is crucial. Sanchez explains that without Plan Colombia, there won't be enough money to fund the deal, meaning no concessions, and the FARC ending the peace and re-entering the civil war. Third off, ending aid immediately will spike violence in Colombia. Nielsen of BYU in 2010 finds that severe decreases in aid, called aid shocks, shift the domestic balance of power because during aid shocks, rebels gain bargaining strength within the government, and the government no longer has a credible threat behind them. This is why Nielsen concludes that aid shocks, the sudden decrease in aid that the AF advocates for, doubles the probability of armed conflict in that region. This is especially harmful in Colombia with the active peace deals between the Colombian government and the rebel groups like the FARC and ELN. Now, looking at their first convention about cracking down on this drug trade displacement, talking about this interdiction, they talk about only forcing cartels to reroute to Mexico rather than overseas. Couple of issues with their argument. First of all, it never said that Plan Colombia specifically is responsible for the getting rid of the smuggling routes through the Caribbean. That's not necessarily domestic. But then second of all, in their own card, it says, quote, conditions in Mexico have long been ripe for coca production. This was going to happen no matter what. It's not an impact that's unique. Now, they say that Mexican cartels are worse than Colombian cartels, and they have this pretty much idea of the balloon effect. Couple of responses. First, James Windle from the University of East London explains, quote, Garrett conducted the most comprehensive examination of this field to date. They reviewed 102 studies of evaluated crime prevention efforts and found no displacement in 68 studies, and that where displacement did occur, it was never complete. Moreover, and this is the really key part, they found a diffusion of benefits occurred for 39 of their studies. So at the end of the day, displacement is only going to be helpful. But then third, stability controls the internal link into drug production. Stratifus of Tufts University reports that a peaceful Colombia has the best chance of reducing cocaine traffic in the Andean region to the U.S. because stable Colombia, which has the strongest military and largest growing economy, ultimately controls regional drug production. In order to prevent the balloon effect, we need to stay in Colombia. Now, they say the Mexican war on drugs is responsible for the 100,000 people disappearing. Remember, we mitigate that impact at worst, and at best, we completely get rid of the entire thing so that 100,000 people don't let them break through that buzzword. Connection 2 is about rebel groups. Their first warrant is about manual eradication, but the impact is human rights abuses, so I'm going to respond to that. First response is that you turn it because developmental aid forces corrupt governments to improve. The Huffington Post finds that developmental aid empirically improves poor governance and weak democratic institutions in two ways. First, since aid is contingent on rules that limit corruption and discretion, officials are incentivized to minimize abuses. But second, since development stimulates economic growth and facilitates increased salaries for government employees, it reduces the actual need for corruption in the first place. But second, Plan Colombia is actually effective in combating these government abuses. The International Business of Publication states in 2013 that Plan Colombia has actually reduced government-based human rights violations. In a study of 2,500 applications, less than 2% of the human rights accusations were made against the government. Now, their warrant 2 talks about perception of dependence on U.S., but they're just blatantly false. Colombians support U.S. policy. Kekati Citizens for Global Solutions write in 2016 that Colombians generally view U.S. policies positively, with 78% approval rate of Obama in 2015. Now they read that military assistance increased assassinations. Overall, the homicide rate has gone down by 50%. Funding paramilitary groups, first, the problem is solved. Plan Colombia is not going to do anything now. Whitney of Counterpunch explains in 2016 that the paramilitaries, so they only help the paramilitaries so that they can take down the rebel groups, but now that the FARC are there, they stop their funding of paramilitary groups. But second, they demobilize the paramilitary groups and it lowers overall violence. That's IBP Inc. in 2015, and the impacts don't manifest. Their impact about profit incentive and making money off of drug trade doesn't actually make sense because Plan Colombia actually decreases funding for paramilitary groups because Sontag in the New York Times explains that paramilitaries don't fund their activities with U.S. funds, but drug money and overall financing has gone down because we've harmed their drug trade profits. Thus, we strongly urge negative ballot. Thank you.